Evening, everyone. Let's get started. My name is Jonathan West. I'm a member of the Manchester Select Board. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. Before I do get started, I do want to take just a moment to recognize and be thankful to the amazing community that we live in. As many of you know, over the past 4 days, our neighbors right across the street here suffered immeasurable loss in a structure fire. And the community has come together to raise over $42,000 in 4 days, as well as countless physical donations, services, camps, and the like. So if you've not followed along with that journey, please go to northshirecommunity.org where you can see a list of how you can get involved. So this has been a 6-month process so far. We started in January with the initial meetings, and we moved through the process of special work groups on housing and economic development, and now is the moment where that all starts to come together. And we see the collective comments and feedback from hundreds of surveys, both from residents, businesses, students alike. And it's important because this is a huge milestone in this process. So the draft that is going to be presented tonight is not the final product. It is going to continue to be refined over the next few months. And it's really important that we get your honest feedback as part of this. And as just a reminder, this has all been part of the collective grabbing of information, if you will, from all the different venues that we have done over the past 6 months. I would like to just say that it's important throughout the presentation and discussion tonight that we do keep an open mind and that we listen respectfully and be considerate to one another's perspectives. Manchester is fortunate to have people with different experiences, priorities, and ideas who all care deeply about this community. We may not agree on every recommendation, but I hope we can remember that we are all here because we share the same goal, and that's ensuring that Manchester continues to be a vibrant, welcoming, and sustainable community for many generations to come. So with that, I turn it over to Michael Allen.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you to the Manchester Community Library for hosting us today. My name is Michael Allen. I'm with Regrowth Planning. I've been assisting the town of Manchester with this town plan update, and here today to try and kind of carry us over into the next phase of the project, which is phase 3, and discuss some of the preliminary ideas that we've come up with. As many of you know, the town plan was updated last year, but that was more of a technical update, which really addressed some of the data and statutory requirements that needed to be done for the town plan update, but it didn't really have an opportunity or the time to complete any of the public outreach. And so a lot of this process is really trying to tackle that. And so over the past couple of months, we've had numerous meetings you probably know about, where we've tried to invite the public in to talk about what are the actual issues that you face here in the town, collect some input on various topics on housing and economic development and so forth. And we've been also in parallel with that running some surveys that have been going out sort of globally to the community, as well as targeted to some of the area workers and schools in the area to collect some other input to try and get a sort of a pulse of what's going on in town, and then collecting that information and starting to analyze it to try and look for what are the issues that right now the town plan doesn't really address. And so we've reviewed the input to identify what we feel are a lot of the issues of importance, and I have since developed sort of a list of preliminary goals, policies, and actions which I feel we're ready at this point to try and go through. Oh, thank you. And I've begun to review some of these draft policies and goals with the Planning Commission, but we haven't gotten through everything yet. We felt that it was because we are on a schedule to try and move things forward, we wanted to have sort of a pencils down moment with the public and show you where we're at right now and get some feedback on things. So because of the length of the document, of the different goals, strategies, and so forth, I'm not going to go through everything line by line, but there's a lot of things that I just want to recap with folks and give sort of an overview of that I think are kind of important elements. Some things to note about these right now. These are currently organized by general topic for the purposes of simplicity. For example, economic development and housing. One thing we found is that a lot of the actions don't necessarily neatly fit into one category or another. There are many things that might easily go under economic development and housing and infrastructure, and not sure exactly where the best place is to put it, but picked a spot. So that is one thing to keep in mind. I'm not sure if that's going to be the final organizational format for the actual town plan when we get to drafting that. That's something that's still up for debate. But this right now is just meant to be a simple listing of the vision statement, goals, policies, and actions that we feel should be considered for the town plan. And so I've tried to keep things pretty simple for that. The goals, policies, and actions are really the most important part of the town plan. And so this is the part that I wanted to make sure we get the opportunity to discuss and get some feedback on, because if everybody's fairly okay with what we've developed so far, then putting together the rest of the plan should be relatively straightforward. And so that's where that is. So when we draft the new plan, we may organize these things a little bit differently, and we're planning on going into quite a bit more detail with each of the items. For example, in looking at each of these items, what we would typically do is assign different actions to different entities to say, let's say that the select board or the planning commission would be responsible for shepherding this item or leading it through. And so one of the things we would do is have identifiers in the plan that would identify maybe the zoning administrator or the DRB and so forth. That would be part of the plan. And also potential funding sources, potential funding programs for each of these items from the municipal planning grant system program, the bylaw modernization grant program, and so forth, and then tying that over to what state agency is responsible for that. And as you go down the list, maybe some federal agencies, and then maybe even some local, perhaps local nonprofits, or the town budget would be responsible, and so forth. So that when we get to here, we have the different state and federal agencies and so forth. The idea behind that is so that when we have, let's say, a topic and a goal in the plan, we would state, for example, we would have identify the topic ID, the topic name, then what the goal is that we're trying to achieve, and then underneath that, all of the actions that we feel we should be taking to try and achieve that goal. We would then, next to that, identify, in this case, it would be the select board would be the responsible entity for ensuring that that action gets taken. And then underneath that, the supporting entities such as the DRB or the zoning, which would actually have to assist or provide some sort of a support in getting that done. We would then identify funding programs, grant programs next to it that could potentially fund it, and then give some sort of timeline. What is our goal for achieving when this would happen? So now here, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's called short-term, long-term, medium-term, whatever. The detail of that has not been worked out yet, but we would need to do that for each of these as if they move on to sort of the next round. So in general, economic development and housing were two of the probably most important elements of the plan. as we're putting it together right now. And that's why I listed them first here in this document of things. However, not every action item under economic development is a priority. So there might be some flexibility in how we want to organize these to be more, perhaps we put them in order of what the time frame is, how prioritized they are in terms of time, or how prioritized they are in terms of what we want to accomplish. So in this example, so we have, let's say, in the transportation section, we have a policy to continue to strategically expand and improve the local pedestrian and bicycle network to connect key destinations and areas of interest. And the action item under that, or one of the action items under that, is expand and improve sidewalk connections, multi-use paths, and bike routes as delineated on the future transportation network map. Coordinate with local landowners and businesses owners to facilitate upgrades to ADA compliance. So next to that, we would note that the select board would be in charge of facilitating that action. Underneath it, it would be supported by the Planning Commission and perhaps Department of Public Works, DPW. There are then 3 funding agencies that would be, there we go, 3 funding agencies or funding programs: the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, and the Safe Streets for All grant program, which would be identified as potential funding mechanisms for that work. And then it would show those are each supported or provided by VTrans or USDOT, etc. And then perhaps the duration, what the timeline for achieving this would be, perhaps long-term, so forth. So that's the idea behind how these would be generated. But instead of listing all these transportation things together, we could hypothetically strike out the header for transportation and instead just keyword all of these underneath, saying, you know, this item, this action, technically it covers transportation, it covers recreation, it covers infrastructure, it covers multiple. So we can say that this is covering multiple of these to apply with the state statutes that we have to cover all these topics. And that would give us a lot more flexibility to reorder all these things together so they're not all lumped, like all the transportation things are lumped together and so forth. So that gives us a little bit more flexibility if we were to go down that route. But again, this still needs a bit of work to figure out, to work out all the details of this. Right now, the existing plan implementation table and the existing plan doesn't do many of these things. It doesn't identify some of these funding sources and so forth, or timeline. And so we're trying to improve on that and go into more detail. Another thing I want to note in this item, we mentioned the future transportation network plan. What I really meant by that was basically a bicycle and pedestrian plan that, if you didn't already, there's a copy of it out there. I printed out copies so that you can look at them right now at this meeting. Basically, right now in the town plan includes a sidewalk network map that really shows the existing locations where we already have sidewalks in town. What we're looking to do for the new plan is identifying not just where we have existing sidewalks, but where future sidewalks would be desired based on the input that we heard from the public. Right now I'm calling this the bike and pedestrian map, and it would also identify desired future locations for different trails, paths, bike lanes, crosswalks, and other amenities and so forth. So there's a copy of that outside in case anybody wants. So when I mention that transportation facilities, what I'm really referencing is that bike and pedestrian map. Doesn't quite settle on all the names for everything yet. And also will be included in the plan a future land use map. Right here, the future land use map, this is developed by Bennington County Regional Commission, BCRC, as part of a statewide effort to have all the regional planning agencies develop an overall guide work or framework for land use planning in each of the regions. This will act as kind of the framework for our zoning going forward, and this is something that's still being developed, and we're hoping to finalize with them in the coming weeks, but it's prepared by BCRC, and they would expect us to have this as part of our town plan or something very similar that would act as a sort of a framework for any future zoning. So this identifies general land use areas in terms of intensity of use. And when you see in the handout or the draft goals and strategies, when you see the mention of village center and planned growth areas, I wanted to clarify that those are the pink areas on the future land use map. So when we mention village center and planned growth areas, what we're referring to is the BCRC future land use map that shows the dark pink and the lighter pink areas for Manchester. These are the different future land use areas. So village center, planned growth area. Some of these types of land uses aren't reflected. We just don't have them here in Manchester, so I grade them out. But the village center and planned growth areas are probably two of the most important areas. Some major changes to the goals and policies. Pretty much many of the existing actions and policies from the existing plan have been carried forward. A lot of what our work was doing was identifying what are some new issues that were missed. Because the last plan update didn't really involve much public outreach, a lot of our work was trying to identify what are some new things that the plan right now just doesn't reflect. We've also tried to identify some more strategic actions and steps for a lot of the issues that were discussed in the plan. And we've also tried to, in places where we can, use more specific and actionable language in the wording of things. So in places where we can avoid being kind of vague and mushy-washy, we can actually provide a little bit more teeth to what we're recommending. Among the new goals and policies that are in here right now, one of the things that we try to address is diversifying the economy beyond just retail outlets to try and bring in higher wage jobs, promoting new small businesses and addressing the fact that we need smaller retail spaces, promoting trade skill, vocational, life skill, educational opportunities, evolving sort of a town sort of rebranding and marketing strategy toward those items above. Also kind of clearly trying to identify and incentivize the housing that we need in town, rather than just saying we need more housing in town. Let's say, well, what exactly do we need and how can we incentivize it? Recognizing and addressing the issue of short-term rentals, recognizing the need for more third spaces for just community interaction, sense of community, youth activities, getting together, movie theaters, entertainment, family entertainment, trying to actively identify desired future sidewalk and trail and bike connections in town, recognizing the need for improved wireless and cellular service in town, addressing issues of community character, particularly with regard to chain and franchise stores, policies for where we feel solar power would be most appropriate and where it might not be appropriate. These are all issues that we've tried to strengthen or add to the plan that the existing plan doesn't really address at all. Or if it does, it's very weak. And so we've tried to, adding somebody here, try to address that in the new plan because this is a lot of what we heard from the public outreach and trying to integrate that with the plan. The existing plan right now is over 100 pages. A majority of it is really discussing sort of existing conditions, where things are already in town. And we would like to kind of condense that, clarify and simplify the document to put a lot more emphasis on where do we feel like we need, what do we need to do going forward, and put more emphasis on that and make the document much more straightforward and clear in terms of where do we think we need to go in the future. The next step would be putting together the draft plan, taking these goals, policies, and actions, and putting it together in a cohesive plan that explains everything much more clearly. And overall, I firmly believe that with these new goals and strategies, the plan would much better reflect the actual community and what the community wants, what our needs are here, and the issues that the town faces, more than the way it does right now. So, beyond just today taking comments from the public, there's also a way to submit comments online electronically. So if you get home and you think of something else that you wanted to say, or somebody you know wasn't able to attend today and they're watching the video a week from now, we still want to provide people with the opportunity to provide comments. You can access our information page from the town website at that little icon right there. You can also access it directly from this website, which is our information page, which has copies of meeting videos such as today's meeting should be up there tomorrow. We have meeting notes, we have draft materials, so you can visit this page. I'll leave the address down here in the corner for the rest of the show. When you come to this page, we have large yellow buttons here that say click here for the comment form. If you click that, it will bring you to a comment form where you can type in whatever message and comments you'd like to have for the plan. There's also an option to submit written comments if you prefer pen and paper, want to mail in or drop off comments to Town Hall. We have a drop box at the Town of Manchester town offices. And we want to take public comments today, but because not everybody has a chance to read this, we're looking to leave the public comment period open for maybe about 2 weeks. So I'll leave the online comment form open, and we'll collect any comments that come in from that way. And now I'd like to kind of open it up to some public comments. If folks want to take a moment, take turns to come up to speak at the microphone so the folks on Zoom can hear you and the recording can hear you, like that. Just ask to keep comments relatively brief so everyone gets a chance to speak. And for those of you on Zoom, if you have any comments or questions, try and type them into the Zoom chat, and I will check in periodically to try and make sure that they are incorporated. So with that, opening it up to any comments.
May I just go up to the...
Yes, please, yes.
Okay. First off, thanks very much for doing this whole thing. My name is Sarah McClintock. I represent a nonprofit that was formed recently called North Shore Community Courthouse, whose goal is to renovate and revive the courthouse that was formerly the Bennington County Courthouse. And I know you probably would have never heard of us as an organization, and I wanted to make sure that you're aware that that program is underway, that it's a relatively short-term project that we hope to complete by 2028. So that will be a 3-phase project that does a lot of the things that you are going to be recommending in terms of creating a 3rd space for youth, because it's near PBA, and for community involvement.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I was aware of the project. I believe I mentioned the courthouse in the recommendations as a potential location for some of these things. I was not specifically aware of your organization though, but I did know that the project of the renovation was going on. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Harold Aronowitz, and I've lived in the area only 4 years. I'm associated with Red Sky Time Farm. My daughter and son-in-law run the farm, and I have a major interest in the future of the town, and I can say very briefly that there are 2 main items that the town needs to address. Everything else is icing on the cake, but the two main items are jobs and housing. I checked out the internet. I was interested in seeing what type of well-paid jobs are offered in the town, and by far what stood out were jobs in the healthcare professional field. And what I think might be beneficial is if Manchester runs a job fair for healthcare professionals, which are well-paid jobs, and there's a great demand for healthcare professionals, physicians, hygienists, etc. And I think that we can focus on several areas. You have the hospitals over here, you have the hospital in Rutland, SBMC over here in Manchester, and then you have the hospital in Bennington, and then we have many other community clinics where you have healthcare professionals, and there's a demand for it, and it would be mutually beneficial. We'd be bringing high-paid jobs in the area, and we'd be bringing people in the area to service those jobs. If Manchester really wants to move forward, you're not going to move forward by TJ Maxx jobs. You need high-paying jobs where people can afford the price of housing. Housing is ridiculously high. So I think that now, it's not like New York City, we have a job fair and you attract a whole slew of applicants. This is a far more limited area, but it's a first step in getting high-paid jobs. If we don't get high-paid jobs into the area, we are not going to expand. Very simply that. Because with the price of housing being what it is, you have simple housing, Jameson Flats, where new housing runs $700,000. You have to have a pretty high salary for that. Both husband and wife have to work, and the majority of houses run far in excess of that amount. Second area basically pertains to housing now. I don't know that much about housing, but for housing we would need joint state and town joint ventures in that case. Now, I happen to know, I have a friend whose daughter lives in East Hampton, New York. East Hampton, New York is a very tony area. Price of housing is out of reach for most people, but the town provided subsidized housing for public employees, teachers, lifeguards, and the whole works. And basically, what they had is they'll subsidize the housing. You have to live in the area for a certain period of time, and if you don't, you have to give back the subsidy, and you're able to afford housing in the town. Teachers in this town cannot afford housing. Police officers can't afford housing. Firemen can't afford housing. And that's basically what I have to say. Everything else, as far as bike paths and transportation, that's all nice fuzzy stuff, but that's not going to cut it when it comes to expanding our town. And that's all I have to say. Woo!
Hello. Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Tina Victor, and I guess a couple of things. I know one of the last meetings I attended, there was talk of getting a movie theater in again, but that it would likely have to be a nonprofit. There's Bennington, of course, has Cinema 7 and places, but I didn't see that was mentioned in here, so I don't know if that was something that people, still want to pursue. So that was one point. And then the other thing is, I saw that the need for improved cell coverage, cell service, cell towers, etc. was mentioned. And I think that we do have pretty protective zoning thus far, but I would want to add that I think we should have a setback sort of written in as additional protection, and what is recommended is 500 meters, which is 1,640 feet from a cell tower, but you could round it off and just say 1,500 feet from, inhabited buildings, residential areas, etc. So that's something that I think could be added to the telecommunications, laws that exist. And then one thing that, this is under the natural resources heading. It says, policy, protect and support local agricultural enterprises, traditional working lands, and high-quality soils for agricultural use to ensure they will remain available in the future. But then the following point, action, says consider required cluster subdivision regulations for major subdivisions on agricultural lands or prime farmland soils within the RRRA district. So that seems to be a conflict there, or discrepancy, because do we want to keep the prime farmland open and maintain it, and then I don't really understand the tier 1 and tier 2, and maybe that's something you could explain a little further.
Okay, to your first point, at the economic development presentation, I proposed an idea for sort of a joint venture to create a multi-purpose space that could be used as a movie theater and open space theater, multifunction venue. The general public reaction at that point was that might be too much. It was maybe too aggressive, and that maybe we should dial it down a little bit, dial down expectations. The way it was rewritten here is we talk about much more, I think, vaguely supporting a joint venture with Southern Vermont Arts Center, Dorset Theater, and so forth to jointly work on the creation of such a space that could house theater productions or movies or other whatever productions that would happen. So I dialed it down a little bit. What was the second topic?
Well, it was the cell tower setback.
Cell tower setback I got. As far as protecting the farmland, and the idea is generally to protect the farmland, but if there is a subdivision, we can't block somebody from developing farmland. If they want to sell and develop farmland, we can't really stop that. But what we can do is say, if you're going to develop on this, we want to do a cluster subdivision where it takes all the lots that they would normally be able to do and makes them much smaller and puts them in a smaller area, so they're using up less, they're disturbing less valuable land and leaving the remainder of it natural open space. So in the event that those lands are developed, it's doing less damage than a regular subdivision would. That's the premise, but I understand why that seemed to be conflicting.
Okay, great, thanks.
Bill Johnson, good evening, and I'd like to echo, thank you for all the work you've done on this. I have two questions, I'll do them one at a time. Most decisions that are made for any kind of development or business activity really result from our zoning ordinance. So, do you see much change in our zoning ordinances as a result of this new town plan? And then if so, I'm sure there'll be some, what is the transition period that you allow between implementation of the town plan and those changes?
Good question. I imagine there's going to be a couple of years of period where some of the recommendations would get implemented. The main areas where we're talking about, I know that we're making some specific recommendations for changing the way some of the housing works and some of the housing incentives. I don't know if that would necessarily change. That would change the zoning, but I guess more in the types of housing that would be allowed. The other area where we would be changing the zoning is, give me a minute here. Really talking about the downtown area where we're talking about maybe revising the design standards and the zoning to protect the character of downtown and try and make sure that we're prepared for when another franchise chain company comes along that might want to build something that doesn't match the sort of historic form or character or scale of what makes Manchester special. So that might take a little bit longer to develop.
Okay. Well, what I caution and urge you to pay attention to is particularly when commercial development and or even residential projects, when you have to go before Act 250, that our plans are in sync. It's the worst thing to have is a conflict between your zoning bylaws and then your town plan. Okay.
In other words, as a developer, you want certainty of what's going to be expected of you.
Well, we want
You don't want to be in
in
limbo.
sync
Yeah.
and not have conflicts so that you're presenting a case and saying, well, the town plan says, you know, we need to do that, maximize our density in this zone, and then the zoning plan says, well, you can only do 3 units per acre here, and we're proposing 5 because we want to meet the town plan, but the zoning says you can't do that. That may be
So,
a poor example,
if the sooner we could implement those and get everything in line, the better.
well, correct, and I think there ought to be, look at a transition timetable so that certain issues they say remain in effect in one side or the other until they are in sync. Okay? The second thing is strategies. I think when you talk about actions and putting those, what forms of government are responsible, what sources of funding are available, and who's going to supply it, that's all great. But as we all know, Manchester is way down on the bottom list for state and federal funding. So I think we ought to develop as part of our town plan other strategies that can achieve particularly these phase 1 or tier 1 goals. And those ought to be identified so people can see a path forward as how to achieve those goals other than relying on outside funding.
So in other words, how do we proceed if we aren't able to secure outside funding?
Well, particularly state and federal grants,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody on Zoom with any?
Comments or questions? Next, come on up. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kyle Turner, a resident here at Manchester. I wanted to talk about this map. I think the North Shire proposed crosswalk, great idea. We should do it tomorrow. And then,
Sorry, at the day school.
yeah, the day school.
I want to make sure we're not talking the bookstore or
Yeah.
the other several things that are labeled North Shire.
Yeah, so North Shire Day School. I think we should get out there, throw some paint down, put up one of those crosswalks. We can get it done tomorrow, you know. I had a question what the gateway improvement area was or meant.
That's a good question. I don't know that I've fully flushed out what I was recommending or what we might want to recommend for those gateways. I think coming into town from when you're crossing the railroad tracks, coming into town, and from some of the other direction, it'd be nice to kind of dress that up a little bit and really make it an arrival so people are like, hey, bang, we're welcome in Manchester. But I haven't flushed out what those might entail or look like yet.
Nice. And then my third thing, this was mentioned many meetings ago, and I haven't read this whole thing, so it might be addressed. But someone talked about if there was some sort of like property tax incentive to give older Vermonters that are wanting to size down but live in place to like retrofit their house to become a separate unit maybe there's a way that they can pay less property taxes in the process of turning that one house into a duplex or triplex or something.
Okay. That's a good point. We do have in here a property tax rebate or reduction for folks that are looking to do year-round rentals versus short-term rentals, committing to that for a period. Perhaps that could be either expanded or shifted to more what you're describing is either a transformation to multi-unit or specifically for older folks looking to age in place.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's increasing the housing stock. It's going to be the main thing to bring prices down. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Amelia Wiggins, Executive Director of the Southern Vermont Arts Center and Vice President of the Manchester Business Association. I was delighted to see both SVAC and the MBA expressly written into this plan. I think both of those organizations are really eager to work with the town on community needs, and I would assume that many other of our local nonprofits, which is a real strength of this town, would also be strong partners as we address community needs. So that's my first point. And my second is that I noted, and I just want to underscore that in your vision statement, you write that we should leverage our strong reputation as a desirable tourist destination. And yet there's very little in this plan about leveraging ourselves as a tourism destination, and that is such a key part of our local economy and quite a fragile one, I would say, at this point in time. And so not giving due diligence to protecting and strengthening what is really at the heart of many of our businesses right now, I think is an oversight.
Okay, thank you. So more leverage for the leveraging tourism.
Right.
Okay. I was expecting more complaints, honestly. It's got to be somebody, especially from Bill, maybe. What do folks feel that the vision statement, not that that is a critical element of a town plan, but it's really supposed to be, if you get on an elevator and somebody asks you before the next floor, what's Manchester doing to prepare for the next 20 years, what do you say? And writing these things is always a challenge. What do folks feel that kind of captures what the essence of what we're looking to do? How many, by show of hands, how many folks had an opportunity to review this before coming out today? Okay, so maybe half, okay. That's why we're also leaving this open for a couple weeks to give folks some more opportunity. Honestly, if I were to try and present all of these items in one presentation, we'd be halfway through right now, and half of you would be asleep. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to prepare something where people had an opportunity to review it in advance. Any other? Yes?
Can you explain quickly tier 1, tier 2, somebody else had asked?
Oh, right, sorry, that was the other element that you raised. Okay, the question for those on Zoom was, can you explain the tier 1, tier 2 elements a little bit more? When we're looking at elements of Act 250 environmental review, it's largely been viewed as a burden on, a burden on development to have to go through this review that's really intended to try and protect the environment, the natural environment of Vermont. Sorry, I just need to let somebody in here. So the state has been recognizing that. The state has been saying, okay, well, what if instead of treating everything equally across the state, we recognize the fact that there's some parts of the state that are already developed very heavily, and to treat those areas the same as a wild forest doesn't really make any sense. And so maybe we come up with a Goldilocks solution of Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear. So you have 3 different porridges, if you will. Tier 1 is areas that are already pretty much developed, and they should be allowed to have less environmental review because we're developing in already a city, and so it doesn't make sense to make them jump through all the same hoops. So maybe they get less environmental review or no environmental review in Tier 1. And then at the other end of the spectrum is the more wilder natural areas, the conservation lands. Those are Tier 3, and those would get more stricter environmental review. So the idea is to not treat everything the same. So if we look at downtown Manchester, much of that is already developed. They've divided Tier 1 up into two categories. You have Tier 1A and Tier 1B. Tier 1A means if you were to get Tier 1A classification for, let's say, our planned growth areas, that would mean all of the development in those areas would be exempt from Act 250 review, which would be a big help for folks looking to develop. It would reduce a lot of the burden that they go through. The trade-off, though, is we're really doing away with any sort of real environmental review. That's for all development. Right now, Manchester isn't really positioned for Tier 1A. We might be able to get it. Places like Rutland City are getting Tier 1A. Tier 1B is a partial version of that, where we say the state has recognized we have a housing shortage and we want to encourage housing. So in areas where it's Tier 1B, any housing project within certain parameters would be exempt from Act 250 review. So right now we're looking to get Tier 1B exemption in our Manchester planned growth areas. That's what we're aiming for. It might be possible that later down the road we might be able to get Tier 1A, which would be exemption for all types of development, but at the moment we're really targeting Tier 1B. So if this gets approved at the state level and so forth, then we would be allowing certain housing developments to be approved without having to go through Act 250 review. Sorry that was so long.
And tier
But
2
I look for
is
any
just-
excuse to throw in Goldilocks analogies.
And then tier 2 is just kind of more suburbia maybe, or?
Tier 2 is basically anywhere that's not Tier 1 or Tier 3
Okay.
is Tier 2, and it's the middle child that doesn't really have. And in those areas, things basically stay the same. It's pretty much status quo until they change their minds again. Yes, sorry, in the back.
Michael, can I ask a follow-up question of the?
If you guys don't mind talking to the microphone so the recording can capture us, and folks on Zoom and possibly GNet is, I believe, also feeding this.
I don't know if I would have
Thank
asked
you.
if I knew I had to come on here. But, so I just wanted, hi everyone, I'm Carolyn Alderman, I'm on the Planning Commission. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to the last speaker, and so she stressed the importance of leveraging our tourist economy, which we all agree with. I just wondered if you had any specific ideas or something in mind that you were thinking about?
No,
I think funding has to be part of the solution there. Our state has incredibly slim tourism dollars for all of Vermont, and while the town does support MBA with some tourism ad financing, the ROI on small amounts of tourism spend is really high and would directly impact our businesses and nonprofits. So that should definitely be something that we're talking about together.
Thank you. I know I missed somebody. Sorry, there was somebody over on the right side that had their hand up before the last speaker. I don't remember who it was. Maybe You, sir? Was it? I'm not sure. Okay, sorry. In the brown shirt, ma'am, if you don't mind.
I wondered if there's anything in your planning that addresses municipal parking, because it's hard to invite tourists to come here when there's no place to park.
I don't believe there's anything in here that directly addresses municipal parking. So that's maybe something we could go into in a little bit more detail. That was not something we heard a lot of in some of the public outreach, except that there's a conflict between employees who work in town trying to have a place for them to park while not taking up space for the customers. So that is something to take into account. Bill, sorry.
I'll follow the
If you don't mind, sorry.
I don't see the town plan addressing education at all. And I think we had a section in the former town plan. Is that something that you are, let's say, not addressing because of we have a school district that is in charge of that, and there's dealing with a lot of state issues?
I thought we had language in here that's basically saying we want to support the local education systems and also try and make sure that whatever happens with the Maple Street or MEMS, that we try and get the best out of that, especially in terms of redesigning that campus.
I was just looking at the handout.
Yeah.
Okay.
But perhaps we can look at strengthening that position,
Okay.
supporting the local school systems,
Right. And
because they are an important part of the town.
right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I've lost track of who hasn't spoken yet. Yes, ma'am, in the blue.
So hi, I'm Betsy Rathbun Gunn, and something that seems to be coming up in towns of all sizes that I'm not sure is being addressed is data centers. So I know we have a light purple area on planning that's a new area that's being developed for entrepreneurial areas along Route 7 there.
The enterprise?
Yeah, the enterprise.
That's, I think, technically always been part of our zoning. It's called enterprise in the future land use map. We call it office industrial, I believe.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
So-
their team in the back. Okay, yes, office industrial.
I know it would go through zoning, I know it would go through
Yes.
Act 250, but I get concerned because people think, oh, we're too small town, a data center, we wouldn't be looked at for a data center, but I hope that that's something that we don't see as part of our future, and I'll just say it publicly.
Okay. Thank you. We can certainly do that. Actually, I was surprised on a similar note, surprised that the similar issues of flock cameras didn't come up. And that's something that a lot of communities are trying to figure out right now, or setting up some sort of policy for how are we going to use or not use this technology. And I didn't hear that from anybody, so not to lead the witness, but it's somewhat similar to the data center dilemma of, do people really want this in the community? Do we feel that we should have a policy for it? Yes, if you don't mind coming up, sorry, this is how you'll get an exercise. Otherwise, I can bring the microphone to everybody.
Just in response to your comment about flock cameras, I think a lot of people don't understand what they are or didn't know, possibly until even last week, when the Manchester Journal did an article about it, and that Manchester has flock cameras. So perhaps that's something that can be added to the plan as something the community needs to address.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? I'm going to wait till everyone's out of questions, and then I will offer to bring the microphone to everybody. Any other thoughts? Okay. I'm not kicking everyone out yet, but I do have a couple of things to mention. So hopefully a video of this meeting will be posted on our webpage tomorrow. Notes to follow in a couple of days. I'm asking everyone to please use the online comment form if you have additional comments. And I wanted to give an announcement for those of you interested in the housing issue, particularly for older folks. 802 Homes for All is hosting a series of webinars or Zoom workshops, if you will, to discuss age-friendly housing, aging in place, keeping seniors in the community, and so they're hosting 2 virtual Zoom workshops. I believe we already missed the first one. The next 2 are Thursday, July 16th, and then July 20th. These are, however, by RSVP, so at some point before you go, you need an RSVP either with this QR code here or by going to that web address, tinyurl.com, 802 Homes RSVP. They'll send you a link to join the Zoom meeting. And if you're interested in finding out some of the work that they're doing to try and develop some different housing typologies, housing designs to address this throughout the state, I encourage folks to join in on that. If you have trouble with connecting with them, come and talk to me and I will get you their address that you can connect to. And other than that, I believe that is all.